And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
I have a very special guest today, Professor Dr. Oliver Lazar from Essen, Germany. Dr. Lazar holds degrees in computer science and natural sciences of medicine. As a result of profound personal spiritual experiences following the accidental death of a girl, Dr. Lazar was pulled into the afterlife contacts, and today we're going to talk about it. Dr. Lazar, thank you so much for being my guest today, and welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Before we get into your experience, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Yes, I can, Jeff. As you already mentioned, I am a natural scientist, and 43 years of my life I lived in this materialistic worldview. And I'm having a PhD in the natural sciences of medicine, and for more than 10 years I've been working as a professor for computer science, and I'm teaching algorithms, computer languages, and data structures. That's what I do. And especially during my medical studies, I had a lot to do with natural sciences, like wonderful sciences like biology, chemistry, biochemistry, physics, physiology, wonderful sciences. And everything that I was taught at school and at a university was that everything is based upon matter or material processes. That's what they taught me. So not only our body, even our emotions, our feelings, our sense of moral, our love, everything is based upon matter. And I was totally convinced that this knowledge is assured because it was collected by PhD professors in scientific methodologies. So why would one ever question this? And I did not. So this was my worldview. But on the other hand, I was always open. I was not that kind of scientist who said, I fight against spirituality or things like that, or against religion. That was not me. I was always open for good arguments. And I think a good scientist should always be open for good arguments, no matter where they come from. But spirituality never really was an issue in my life. Okay, I never had contact with spirituality. But I never rejected spirituality. And I like to emphasize this because there are a lot of scientists who really actively fight against spirituality. They even organize themselves in skeptics associations. And I found one association even in the United States. As I have seen, we have here one in Germany, one in Switzerland, which is called GWUP, as far as I know, here in Switzerland. And these scientists really fight against spirituality. And their goal is to reveal all the fraudsters and fake mediums who deceive their clients. That's what they do. But that was not me, and that is not me. Of course, there are also fraudsters. Yes, there are. But there are also very talented and reputable providers in this field of spirituality, but it's not always easy to recognize them. Okay, but I am different. I have always been open to good arguments. But as I already said, I never really had contact with spirituality.
Would it be safe to say that you were an atheist?
No, I wouldn't say. I just didn't care about this topic because there were other things in my life that I was interested in. I never really thought about, is there a God or is there no God or can I prove God? It never was an issue in my life. Absolutely not.
It sounded like you were open to spirituality, but it appears that you weren't a spiritual person. You had no interest. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But my wife was interested in spiritual topics. So she always read books about these kind of things. And sometimes I also had taken a look into her books, and I was zipping. Do you say zipping in English on TV?
Zipping, we may say browsing. Skimming.
Browsing. And sometimes you have a TV show where they're talking about near-death experiences or reincarnation, and I found it quite interesting, but I never really thought about it all day long. Okay, I just thought, okay, maybe it's interesting, but no, I'm doing something else. So that was my life, 43 years.
So basically you had a life of academia and you were completely into science. You weren't really that interested into spirituality. And as far as you're concerned, everything that has to do with the body, including mental processes, emotions, was all physical.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah.
All right. So
because why should I question these kind of things? Because I have learned it at school, at universities, and there were PhD professors who have taught me all these assured things. So why should I question this? And so it was kind of this is assured knowledge. That's it.
It's almost like saying, why question the religion of science?
I would agree by now that science really is some kind of religion. And this is what I describe also in my book. There is really a large part in my book where I question things like abiogenesis, evolution, and things like that. Because when you really take a close look at many things, for example, how life began and how life evolved, there are so many open questions that you cannot answer. And our science just says it must have been so, because otherwise there can't be Darwinism or something like that. Right. But now I'm aware of this.
Right.
Just because of my spiritual awakening. But before this event, I was not interested in questioning these topics.
To me, it also makes perfect sense that a scientist like you would never question it unless they had a spiritual awakening.
Somehow a scientist obviously needs to have, I call it a kicking the ass in the spirit, the spiritual ass. Okay, a scientist needs an experience like this, like a near-death experience or something like that, to start researching spirituality. And so it was in my case as well.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, let's move on to your spiritual awakening and what happened.
Okay, well, it was the 9th of October, 2017. And yeah, this experience really completely turned my life upside down. I was driving my then 13-year-old daughter to school, and we witnessed a car accident, a fatal car accident. There was this huge concrete mixer truck turning right, and due to a blind spot, the driver didn't see a girl riding her bicycle. And the truck ran over her. And that girl was one of my daughter's classmates. Her name was Joma, which is the short form for Johanna Maria, but everybody called her Joma. And we arrived there shortly after the accident, maybe a few seconds or minutes after the accident. And we didn't really recognize her, that it really was Joma. We just became aware of it in the afternoon. And the moment I found out that Joma was dead because she died in that accident, and the moment I found out that Joma is dead, I felt such a deep grief that I have never felt before in my life. And it was a grief that pulled the ground out from under my feet. It felt just like as if I had lost my own daughter. It has torn my heart apart. And of course, now you might say, Oliver, okay, this is natural. This is a normal reaction. This is usual empathy. And to a certain point, I would agree. But what I felt really went far, far beyond. And my family didn't recognize me anymore because I really became depressed. I became silent, I have withdrawn, and it all felt really weird. So why was it weird for me? Because I didn't know that girl at all. She was a complete stranger to me. I had contact with almost every other child of my daughter's class, but I never had contact to Joma. So she really was a complete stranger to me and even her family. But there was this brief moment at a school event that I can remember by now, where we passed each other and our eyes met for a split second. And I didn't know that I had a memory of this moment. But after her passing, this event was somehow brought to the front of my mind. Absolutely clear, every day. So although she was a complete stranger to me, I felt an incredibly deep connection with her, and I couldn't explain it to myself why it was like that. And now comes my spiritual awakening. Okay, it was about 3 or 4 weeks after the accident. I was sitting here in my office on the sofa, and I really was very, very sad. And I just sat down and I closed my eyes. And I was thinking of JeffMara. I was thinking of the accident. I reflected the whole situation, and I was thinking of her parents. And yeah, what then happened is very difficult to describe. I can hardly find words to describe my experience. And in my book, I wrote that there are no adjectives in all the languages of this world that could even come close to describing what I felt at the moment. And it all started with an inner vibration. And I had goosebumps only on the left side of my body. And these goosebumps were running up and down. So it started in my hairs, just like as if someone would pull my hair or grab my hair. And then it was running down my cheeks, my arm, my back, my legs, down to my feet and up and down again. Only on the left side. And I never have felt something like that before in my life. And then I was flooded with an infinite love. And this was a kind of love that I didn't know. You know, I am a father and I have 3 daughters. And I would say here in this human life, there's no bigger love than the love to your own children. And the love that I felt at that moment was far beyond. It was infinite, it was divine, or I don't know which word I could use to describe it. And I had tears from joy running down my face. And what else did I do? I perceived light. I perceived light. It was just like as if light was shining out of every single cell of my body, and the whole universe was shining. And it felt so, how should I explain it? It was so beautiful. It was overwhelming, and it felt like home. I couldn't see anything, so there was no visualization or something like that. It just felt like, wow, I'm so happy here. I'm back home, and I was not alone. I felt that there is another consciousness approaching me from the outside, or a soul, or whatever I should call it. I didn't know exactly who or what it was, but I knew there is someone else, and I am loved. I am loved by this soul or whatever it was. And I didn't really question it in any way, because all this came to me in such a realness and in such a pithiness. And not for a single second did I doubt this experience, because it was so real, just as real as if you were hitting me or you were pulling my hair. So this was real, no doubt about it.
You said that you saw light, but then you kind of didn't see light with your eyes. Can you clear that up for me? Did you have your eyes closed and you were visualizing light, or were you moved into some kind of like meditative state where you were seeing light?
Well, my eyes were closed, and I would say it was perceiving light. So I didn't see the light with my physical eyes, but I have perceived the light. Maybe it's a visualization. And I really was in some kind of meditative state. That I would agree. Yeah. And until today, or every single day, I do meditate every evening. And I can experience these feelings again and again, every single day. So it was not just a one-time experience. I have learned how to meditate, and I can feel this love again and again, and this inner vibration and these goosebumps. So it was not just a one-time experience.
You felt like it was another being that was about to contact you. Was that God, or was it the girl?
Well, at that moment, I didn't know who it really was, but I knew that might be something like a spirit guide. But by now, I know that it was JeffMara, because I can have contact to her every single day when I am meditating, and I can recognize her because it's always the same pattern. So there's a special pattern when she's coming close to me. It starts with this vibration on my cheek and so on. So it's a very specific pattern. So it was a soul contact to JeffMara, but I didn't know that at that moment who it was.
So what happened next after that initial experience?
In that moment, it was absolutely clear to me that my life would change without a question. So someone has opened the door to spirituality, and I saw my new path. And without a doubt, I knew that I have to go this path. This was absolutely clear. But what was that? What did I feel? So I had a lot of question marks in my head, of course. And as I already said, I knew that these feelings didn't come from me. It was more like that a consciousness was approaching me from the outside. And by now I know it was JeffMara. Mm-hmm. And I could not ignore or even erase this experience because it was too intense. And I was searching for answers. So I was reading books over books. I had read more books in a short period of time than I had read in 43 years before combined. And further answers I found from people who reported their near-death experiences because they report of very similar things. So I was obviously not the only one.
Do you have any communication with JeffMara at this point?
Well, I try to. I try to. Sometimes I have emotions. I can perceive her emotions. I have sometimes words in my head or images in my head. But I'm not a real good medium. A medium has other capabilities, so there's a real communication. You have a question, you get some kind of an answer. And for me, it is very difficult, but I would say I have taken a glimpse into this world, and I know how this communication can work, because sometimes there is just a bit of a conversation. But when I'm asking a particular question, it's very difficult to get an answer. In most cases, it's or the best communication is when I'm very emotional, when I'm very sad or very happy, or when there is a very important situation, then I can sense or perceive her presence, and I know she's there. But there's no really communication with information. And that makes me sad somehow, because I really would like to communicate with her, just like a phone call or something like that. But that's not possible for me.
So if you look at this from your old self scientific way or scientific point of view, how do you explain what happened? Do you think that you were in such a state of emotional sadness that she could somehow see you from the other side and reached out to you and helped you?
I think the key is that I'm a very empathic person. And this is the key to the spiritual world. I would say when you're a very sensual person and you have and you can perceive very subtle things. Is this a correct word? Subtle?
Yes.
When things could be subtle, yes. Then the communication is much easier, as if you're a person who really only lives in this material world. And I think that JeffMara's soul and my soul, we know each other. So there is some kind of, how do you call it? A contract. We had a contract in the spiritual world before we incarnated here on this planet. And I think she's helping me right now with several tasks, for example, researching the spiritual world.
She may have been a member of your soul group.
Yes, exactly. Well, my medial teacher, which her name is Bettina Suvirode, she told me she might be my twin soul. And this is why our connection is so deep. And it would be very typical that you don't have a life here together on Earth. Twin souls never meet as human beings, or even not for a long time. And so maybe she is some kind of a twin soul for me.
Were you always such an emotional person, or did this just happen the first time when you had your experience?
No, I always was very, very emotional, always. Whenever I'm watching a TV show or a movie, I'm crying, and yes, very emotional person. Okay. But there is a very important topic, because I have visited 2 mediums with very interesting information, because this was just the starting point. This experience. I needed more answers, so I booked an appointment for an aura reading with a medium. I just wanted to exchange a little bit by conversation. That was the idea, so I really didn't want to book an aura reading, but it was the only chance to get into contact with that medium. So 4 months after the accident, I sat in the medium's office for that aura reading, and she didn't know anything about me except my phone number, my first name, and that's it. And then she started with the aura reading. But the aura reading more or less did not take place at all, because after 5 minutes, the medium said to me, "Oliver, I'm sorry, but I cannot see anything. There is nothing more I can tell you." And at first I really was very disappointed, of course. But somehow I also was very happy about it, Jeff, because my heart was obviously reaching out for something else. And I just didn't know exactly what it was. And the medium then said, "Oliver, now I'm opening for the spiritual world." So she had some kind of an on-off switch for the spiritual world, and then she switched on. And suddenly this aura reading developed into something like an afterlife contact. And the medium said to me, "Oliver, I can see a girl who's showing me that she died in a bicycle accident. Do you understand this?" And I looked at her in amazement, and I said, "Yeah, of course I do." And I was so happy. But I thought to myself, "Oliver, how could this be? I'm a stranger to JeffMara. I'm not entitled to any afterlife contact with her. So what's happening here?" But it felt so good, and then I knew that I obviously came there exactly for that reason. The girl proved herself as well as she could. I didn't know much about her, but the medium described her outward appearances, the color of her hair, her size, and everything was correct, what she has told me. And then the medium said, "I see her riding a horse." I didn't know much about JeffMara, but I knew that she was a passionate horse rider, so I confirmed it, and that was wonderful proof. Because even if the medium had done some research on the internet, she never would have found any information of JeffMara, because there is no connection between me and her. Mm-hmm. And now comes the most important point. Namely, the medium said, "Now the girl is showing me 2 number 1s. And she emphasized that it was not an 11. So really 2 number 1s. And I couldn't do anything with this information. I checked the date of birth, the phone number, the address, zip code, everything, but nothing matched. And the medium said, "Oliver, that's no problem. This happens quite a lot. And usually things like that clear up afterwards." And she was totally right, because after the sitting, I asked JeffMara's parents, I visited her parents, and I asked her mother about the 2 number 1s. And she didn't know what they could mean either. So I was really very disappointed. But when I told her that JeffMara was showing herself riding a horse just before that, this changed the situation. And JeffMara's mother looked at me in amazement, and she explained, "Okay, now I understand it. Because shortly before her accident, JeffMara won first place twice in an equestrian tournament." And Jeff, I can't tell you how powerful this moment was, because where should this information have come from? This is a highly specific information, and the mother and JeffMara's mother could verify this information. So neither the medium nor I did know the information, but her mother, JeffMara's mother, she could verify this information. And this is the most important part of our study. So we were searching for messages transmitted during a sitting that could not be verified immediately during the sitting, which have to be verified afterwards, and then they turn out to be true.
Wow, that's
okay,
amazing.
So really utterly overwhelming moment. So for me, it is obvious and the only permissible conclusion that this information or this piece of information came from JoMa. And I'm pretty sure that her consciousness is apparently still there. And as I already said, this kind of evidence is the most important building block in our ERIM study.
How did JoMa's parents react to you when you presented them with this information?
Well, it's difficult because I didn't know the parents at that moment. So I somehow knocked at their door and said, "Hi, here I am. I have a message here." So it was a very specific situation. So they are not religious. They are, I would say they are atheists. But as I told the story of the two number ones, I have seen it in her eyes, in her mother's eyes, that suddenly she was very surprised. And maybe this was the starting point for her to consider that maybe there is more, so that there is evidence. And I hope that I could help her. I'm not sure if I really succeeded, but maybe it was for her the first step into a spiritual world and the first step back to her daughter.
Have any other spirits or souls out there contacted you? And if not, do you see a possibility of you at some point becoming a medium yourself and communicating with other spirits?
Well, I was thinking about it, to become a medium, but I'm not so talented. That's why I stopped my training, because I had training with Bettina Suvirode, which is the medium I made the ERIM study with. And I also had contact, for example, with my grandfather, because when I am thinking of him and in a state of meditation, for example, there is some kind of a visualization, and I really can see him. And the pattern of his contact is different to the pattern of JoMa. So when he is close to me, I can perceive goosebumps on the right side of my body. Okay, so there's another pattern, and I can distinguish between different souls. But I'm not talented enough to become a medium, I would say.
Can you tell us about the second medium?
I still was a skeptic scientist, and this first sitting was overwhelming, but it did not convince me 100%. So I needed more evidence. And yeah, supposedly there was this previous life where I was the father of that girl. That's what the first medium has told me. Yeah, she told me, "Oliver, the girl shows me that in a previous life, you once were the father of JoMa, and you had to witness her death in that previous life." This is what the first medium has told me. So I went to the second medium, who gave a seminar with the topic of reincarnation. And I thought, okay, this might be a good idea. And the second medium is Bettina Suvirode, and she's living quite close to me here in the Ruhrgebiet, the Ruhr area here in the western part of Germany. And there were about 25 people who participated in this seminar. And there was this introduction round, and I was the last one in line. And I was sitting right next to Bettina. And after I just said my name and that I witnessed the accidental death of one of my daughter's classmates, she already interrupted me. And she said, "Yes, Oliver, and the girl is standing right behind you." And she said that you were once her father in a previous life, and that in that life you had to experience her early death, but you shall not experience that again in this life. Okay, and then I was very surprised. So I looked at her and I said, I couldn't believe it. Now the second woman, a complete stranger to me, tells me exactly the same highly specific story about my previous life. And I can assure that the two mediums do not know each other. I can say that with certainty because I know Bettina by now very well. So they definitely do not know each other. And if the two mediums had told me that I once was JoMa's father in a previous life, then I think it could have been explained by association. So according to the motto, well, let's tell him that he once was her father, then he's happy. But it was different. Both mediums said independently from each other that I also had to experience her death in that previous life. And I think this is a very specific piece of information. Mm-hmm. And Bettina continued. She could tell unbelievable details about the accident. For example, that it was a truck, because I didn't tell her that it was a truck. I just said it was an accident. And she said it was a truck. She could tell me the color of the truck. And she could tell me where JoMa died, that she did not die at that place, that she died in the afternoon in a hospital. And there were so many details. And the descriptions were so precise that I had to ask JoMa's parents to confirm all this. And I would say about 90% of the messages were correct. So you can't explain it from our materialistic worldview, what has happened there. And I could not ignore this. And I think such authentic messages from the beyond are so comforting. Mm-hmm. And I met so many other mourning people, especially parents who have lost their child. And when you experience that these inconsolably suffering people can suddenly smile again, and they somehow experience healing, then I would say this is one of the most beautiful experiences in my life. And exactly this consolation motivated me to start my research on afterlife contexts. So there are so many mourning people who are stuck in their materialistic worldview, and I just thought when I can show them scientific evidence for the survival of our consciousness, even after the physical death, maybe I can free them from their grief. And this is my motivation. This is why I have started the ERIAM study.
Can you go a little bit deeper into the ERIAM study for us?
Yes, ERIAMS is an acronym. It stands for Empirical Research of the Effectiveness and Authenticity of Messages from Spirit, where spirit is spiritual world. And this is the world's largest study on afterlife contexts by mediumship with 243 participants. In the first survey, we had to interrupt the study due to the pandemic situation. But in the last year, we decided to continue our study. And by now, we almost have 400 participants. Our goal is to reach 500, maybe one day even 1,000 participants. And well, it's an international study. We had participants from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, of course. There were clients from Spain, France, Luxembourg, Denmark, United States of America, so from everywhere. And Bettina and I, we are the initiators of the study. There were 4 members. We brought in a second medium. Her name is Tanja Schlömer, here from Germany. And they both are full-time mediums. And number 4 is a psychotherapist. Her name is Katrin Stephan from Tübingen, here in the south of Germany. And she has over 20 years of professional experience in dealing with mourners. And Tanja and Bettina together have given over 10,000 sittings. So I would say we really have brought enormous experience and expertise in this area of the study. And now I'd like to tell you something about the study design. So what did we do?
Yeah.
No research funds were available for us. So we had to see how we could integrate the study into our normal working day. We basically used the very normal sittings that were booked with the 2 mediums. And we used the scientific methodology of a questionnaire. It was a short questionnaire, just 13 questions. So why did we do that? Because most of the clients are or were still in deep grief. And we didn't want them to answer 200 or 300 questions. I know there are other studies out there with 200 or 300 questions, and they had to answer for hours. And we wanted to avoid this. That's why we asked them only the most important questions. So after 5 to 15 minutes, they could finish this questionnaire. And we didn't interview them immediately after the appointment, but we waited 3 to 4 weeks before we sent out the questionnaire. So why did we do that? And there are 2 reasons for that. The first reason is that right after a sitting, it can be that you're very euphoric and you're so happy. And then the people will always tick very good in the questionnaire. But then after a while, maybe they reflect the sitting and they find out, oh, this could have been researched or something like that. Or then doubts arise after all. And in my lectures, I usually present a sequence of the Netflix documentation series Surviving Death. I think this is also available in the United States. Okay, you know that series. In episode 3, there is a medium from the Netherlands. Her name is Nicole De Haas. And she's giving a sitting, a spiritual session, and there is this family in the living room. And she says, I see a green car, green like a frog. And she says to the family, you like fish, you sell fish. And she said a typical phrase would be, hook it up. And the whole family was very surprised. They look at each other in amazement because everything of this was true. There was a man in that family who really had a green car, a green sports car. And the family is the owner of a fish restaurant. So they do sell fish. And they have a menu card. And on that menu card is a phrase, hook it up. So everything was right. But after a short period of time, they found out, hey, when I'm searching my name on Instagram, you can find my Instagram profile, and there you can see photographs of this green car. And when you Google the family's name on the internet, then you find the homepage with the restaurant. And there you can see, okay, they are selling fish, and then there you can find the menu card with hook it up. Mm-hmm. So the entire sitting was completely worthless. Evidence that can be researched publicly is completely worthless. And I don't want to say that Nicole De Haas has cheated here in the sitting. I just want to say that this kind of evidence is not convincing. And with you, I mean, you as a client, you can protect yourself a little by registering with a false name. That's what I always say. When you book an appointment with a medium, use a false name and use an email address that you would not usually use. Just use an email address of your friend or a new email address.
That's a good idea.
Okay, and this was the first reason. There was a second reason for why we waited 3 to 4 weeks before we sent out the questionnaire. And that reason is that we wanted to check those kind of messages that only could be verified afterwards. That means messages that neither the medium nor the sitter could know about. The sitter is the client, the person who gets the information. So just like Joma's message with the 2 number ones. So the sitter needs time to verify the messages. And I will go into this topic in more detail a bit later when we talk about the results of the story. Okay, this is just a brief information so that you know why we waited 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, then let's talk about our research questions. And the first and most important research question relates to the authenticity of the messages transmitted. That is, in how far can we be really sure that the message really is from the deceased one and is not the result of psychological tricks such as code reading. Maybe I explain this expression code reading, which is or code reading is psychological techniques to pretend that you are giving a message which comes right from the beyond. For example, you're watching the client, you're watching the clothes they wear or the jewelry they wear, the way they speak and what they say between the lines, and then you draw conclusions out of the situation, and then you just give the impression of giving a message right from the beyond. But there's a problem with code reading, because you cannot leave this general level. You can't reach highly specific information. You have just general pieces of information. For example, there is something called like Barnum effects or rainbow rules. Rainbow rules would be that you say the deceased one was a very happy person, but there were times in his life where he was very sad. Okay, so there are both sides of an emotion in it. And just imagine the situation. There are parents who have lost their child, and the medium would say, "Oh, I can perceive your child, and your child was a very happy child, but there were days where your child was very sad."
Yeah.
Do you really think that you can convince any father or mom with such a kind of information? I don't think so. Okay, well, this is cold reading, psychological tricks. That's what skeptics always say. This would be the reason for a communication with the beyond. Okay, in other words, we concentrated on highly specific pieces of information. So we have distinguished between two categories of evidence. And the first category is about such evidence that the sitter can immediately confirm during the sitting. That means we are talking about things that the bereaved person also knows about. And the corresponding question in the questionnaire was, could the medium report specific events or facts that it could not possibly have known? Okay, this was the question in the questionnaire. And I'd like to share some examples with you so that you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And the first example comes from a mother who lost her daughter. And this is what she has written in the comment section of the questionnaire. She's written, the medium also knew that I had lost 2 unborn babies. That also was correct. She even saw the pets, a rabbit and a fish, of the deceased. What girl has a single fish as a pet? You certainly can't just guess that. That's what she said. Or another example, I was told the exact cause of death, namely suicide by carbon monoxide. And it's not like that there's the medium sitting opposite the client and listing all causes of death, heart attack, cancer, and this and this. And number 20 is suicide by carbon monoxide. And then the client says, yes, right, now I believe in it. No, it's just like the medium directly knows, okay, I can perceive it was a suicide by carbon monoxide. Okay, because this is convincing. Mm-hmm. Or items that were placed in the coffin could be listed. Or the content of the letter that was placed in the coffin for the deceased could be reproduced. Or the medium could imitate the speech impediment of the deceased. So where should this information come from when you can imitate a speech impediment? Okay, so now you have a feeling of what kind of evidence we are talking about here. And over 90% of the participants stated that they received such clear, highly specific evidence, and a further 8% answered rather yes. And the results on this question were so overwhelming that sometimes we were even happy about the bad results because we thought that no one would believe us later.
Mm-hmm. Did you say earlier that this is the largest study of mediumship in the world?
As far as I know, yes. Mm-hmm. There are other studies. For example, Evelyn Elsässer and Professor Chris Rowe from United Kingdom. They also did a very large study with more than 1,000 participants, as far as I know, but it was not by mediumship. Mm-hmm. They just examined afterlife contacts from the bereaved, but not with the help of a medium.
So far your results are showing that 90% of your experiments are proving that afterlife mediumship contact is true.
Yes, that's right. And it doesn't matter if you're a skeptic person or not, because we also had 36 skeptic people in our study. So we have distinguished between several groups. There were persons that who were already convinced that there is a survival of our soul after physical death. And of course, there was a group who was very skeptical, and there was a group of the hardcore skeptics. They said, I absolutely do not believe in it. And we had 36 people who were very skeptic, and all of them gave the same answers than those who were convinced of it beforehand. So there is absolutely no difference between the groups.
That's amazing, yeah, because I was going to ask if you had experimental subjects similar to that, and you gave me the answer. What about the proof that was verified afterwards?
Okay, well, this type of evidence that I have mentioned is not necessarily sufficient to prove the deceased, because all this information is not only known to the deceased one, but also to the sitter. So no one could speculate that this information might have been obtained through a telepathic connection between the medium and the sitter, and not between the medium and the deceased one. That is why we have gone one step further, and we were looking for exactly such messages whose content could not be verified immediately, like the example with 2 number ones and the two first places in an equestrian tournament by JeffMara. So the sitters had to do some research on it. For example, ask their relatives or read documents. And here we can also see that we could not have used blinding in our study, because there are, of course, other studies that worked with blinding. But blinding would mean that the medium would not see the client, and the medium would not speak to the client, and the medium would give a sitting, and the sitting is transcripted, and the sitters have to read all the transcripts and to pick out the sitting which was meant for them. So this is how blinding would work. But imagine the situation in our study design. You would have transcripts with information that you do not know. So how could you recognize your own sitting when there is information in it that you have to verify afterwards? So our study design was not feasible with blinding. And I think there are studies. For example, Julie Beischel has published a study last year with 58 participants with blinding. And I think our study is a wonderful complement to this study. So in combination, it's very, very powerful, I think. And I just want to give you one last example for such a proof which could be verified afterwards. And there was a mother who has lost her 13-year-old son. And she wrote in the comment section of the questionnaire that the medium told her that her son would show her his funeral, and his favorite teacher was also there, and he was wearing an orange jacket. And the parents didn't know, because I had a phone call. The boy's father was calling me, and he said to me, Oliver, I've seen this interview, because I had an interview last year here in Germany where I have told about this case. He said, I am the father of this boy, and I'd like to tell you about some details. He said to me, I was in a kind of a tunnel. So at the day of the funeral, there were 500 people at the funeral, and the parents did not know who their son's favorite teacher was. So they had to ask the classmates about the favorite teacher. And then they asked the favorite teacher about the clothes he wore at the funeral. And the teacher said, I wore an orange jacket. So there is really some kind of a chain of events. And at the end of this chain, you find that this information is true. He really wore an orange jacket. And in my eyes, this is an objective verification. And by now, we have over 120 such cases in our study.
When do you plan on publishing the study, and how do you think the scientific world will react to it?
Well, the study is published, and I have decided to publish it in my own book, which was published in September 2021. It's currently only available in German. We are currently searching for an English publisher, and I have already made a notification list on my homepage, and there are already 350 people waiting for an email where I can tell them, okay, right now it's available in English, but we are still searching for an English publisher. And that's where I have published my study, and there you can read all the details. And I did it on purpose in the book, because my goal is not to reach the scientific world. I don't want to gain scientific reputation. I would rather say I am endangering my reputation, and I'm afraid of losing my job when I go to public with all these topics. And so my goal is to reach the people. So who could I have reached when I would have published my paper in a renowned journal? Maybe a few scientists, but
Right.
When it is a peer-reviewed journal, there wouldn't be a chance that it would have been published anyway. So that's why I have decided to show the people what I have done. Everything is transparent. Everybody could decide for himself if it is conclusive, if it is logical, what we have done. And that's why I have published it in my book. And it's really very successful here in the German-speaking world. So it's a bestseller here in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. We are in the 4th edition, and we started in September 2021.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I think if you're especially showing these cases of children who have died, you will help a lot of grieving parents out there.
That's my motivation, right?
How does the German population in general view mediumship?
It's difficult to answer, I think. I think that there is some kind of a change in our country. I would say there are a lot of people who are open to spirituality, but they are afraid to tell this in the neighborhood, or to tell or to speak about it with their friends, because they're afraid that the others think that they are gone mad or that they are crazy. That is why I think that my work is so important, because when you have a scientific basis, you don't have to be afraid any longer to speak about it in public. And in general, I would say the church and the scientific world, they are both very dogmatic in Germany. I don't know if it is the same in the United States, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And but in between, there are a lot of people who are very open to the spiritual world. But it's nevertheless, it's difficult to be accepted here.
I think we've gone so far in one direction of science that there are parts of the world that are ready for some type of spiritual reawakening.
And I think you just have to deliver good arguments. This is the most important thing. And when you're intelligent and you really read those books, because this is really a problem. I receive a lot of emails where other scientists are very skeptical, and they criticize me. And when I ask them, have you read my book? Do you know my arguments? Mm-hmm. Then they say no. And then I wonder, why do you criticize me when you do not even know my arguments?
Right.
And this is what I said, they are very dogmatic. But I would say 99% or even more of the emails that I receive are very positive, even from the academy. So there are a lot of PhD professors, even PhDs from biology, geology, and physics, teachers who are supporting me and say, this is really beautiful, a wonderful study, and they want to support me. But when I ask them, okay, when you want to support me, just go on stage together with me and say, here, we have evidence for spirituality, they are afraid. They say, no, I don't want to go into public with this topic.
Now, you mentioned people emailing you. If my audience wants to email you and ask you questions, are you open to that? And if so, what's your email address?
Yes, I'm absolutely open for it. And I'm receiving around about 20 emails each day. So it maybe takes a while until I can answer the emails, but I appreciate it. And you can reach me on my homepage, which is oliver-lazar.com. And there you can find a contact form, or you can use my email address, which is Info at oliver-lazar.com.
All right, you've got the study out. You have the book. What is the title and where can they get it? On Amazon?
The title is in German, Jenseits von Materie, which would be Beyond Matter in English. Mm-hmm. And it's available everywhere, especially on Amazon. Mm-hmm. And on Amazon, I have been the bestseller #1 in the category Reincarnation and Death for more than 16 weeks.
Oh, that's awesome.
In Germany and Austria and Switzerland.
That's awesome. Yeah. Congratulations. So you have the book, you have the research. Do you have anything else going on that you want us to know about?
Yes, there are some projects for this year. I'd like to measure brainwaves because I have seen a video with Dr. Amen, who is a brain specialist from New York, and he has done some measurements with Teresa Caputo, Long Island medium from the United States. And I found it very interesting because there were delta waves in her brain during the channeling. But delta waves you usually have in a deep trance, not when you're speaking. So a skeptic would say, okay, all of this is code reading, but when you're doing code reading, you never would have delta waves in your brain. You rather have beta waves or even higher waves in your brain. And this is my next project. So we will start this spring with several mediums here in Germany and in Switzerland. And we are measuring EEG brainwaves and would like to investigate on that.
I think that would be a great idea. And I also think it would be great when you're meditating and you feel like you're contacting your father or Joma, it'd be great to run an EEG on you and see what kind of results you get.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
When we leave our physical body, what is left? I think it is the infinite love. This is what we are. This is what is left when we leave our physical body. So our consciousness definitely survives.
Dr. Lazar, thank you for that message. And thank you so much for doing the research. I think you're doing very important work. And thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.